fellow book talkers. Today I want to talk about something that I don't think gets enough love on Book Talk, and that is your novel in verse. So I'm going to do a little series of a couple videos that really highlight some of my absolute favorite novels in verse. If it's a genre that you've never tried, I mean, it's within lots of genres, but if it's a format you've never tried, I strongly recommend it. April is Poetry Month, so it's a great time to dive in and give a novel in verse a shot if you've never done it before. If you have done it before, I'd love to hear what your favorites are too. So we'll get started. The first one I want to talk about is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. Here we go. This is the first one that I ever read that wasn't, that's a contemporary YA novel. It's not, Beowulf or some epic tale. But this has won its awards for good reason. This features main character Will, whose brother Sean has just been shot and killed. And Will is contemplating the rules, right? The rules of society, the expectations that people have for him and what he's going to do, which is to get revenge and to go and kill the person who killed his brother. But as he is descending the elevator, people are getting in and off of it who aren't really there. Some people are no longer living. Some people it would be impossible for them to be there. But I love this aspect of it because Jason Reynolds just totally breaks the rules of what we expect from a writer. It doesn't even really feel like magical realism to me. It just feels like, I don't know, just like something so beyond that. Like maybe it's in his head, or maybe it's all of society like whispering to him that it could be different, or it's up to you what you think it is. But Jason Reynolds breaks the rules, and he does it in a fantastic way. If you haven't read this book, I recommend it. It's a very short read because it's in verse, free verse, and you're gonna love it. So read it. Hello again. This is part 2 of a little series I'm doing for April on novels in verse. So April's Poetry Month, and there are some really fantastic authors writing poetry, but in lots of different genres for contemporary young adults. So if you haven't tried a novel in verse, here is a second one that I recommend, that I loved. This one's called House Arrest by Carrie Holt. This one's for a younger audience. The first one I did was Long Way Down, more mature. This one, I think anyone would love it. So good. And this novel follows the main character Timothy as he's put on house arrest because he got busted swiping someone's wallet so he could pay for his little brother's medications. What drives this novel is the characters. Timothy is fantastic. He gets in a lot of trouble for a lot of really just frustrating reasons. And his home life is so full of love, but they find themselves in just difficult situations a lot too. And he's got a parole officer, and he's got a social worker that he works with. And he writes these poems. So you can see, again, it doesn't take a long time to read a novel like this, but he writes these poems with different audiences in mind, or about different audiences. So sometimes it's right after he got done with his parole meeting, or right after his counseling, and things like that. So you get a really in-depth look into his world and how sometimes it kind of feels like society is against him. Sometimes he makes bad decisions that you're just like, yeah, I get it. I get why you did that, even though that was not a good choice. And you just see the people who love him and want to just see him through this journey that he's on. And this is a good character book. So highly recommend. You will laugh and cry and want to buy all of K.A. Holt's books, no matter how old you are, because I really think they're all going to be fantastic. So give it a try. Poetry Month. Book Talk needs to give more love to books like this. So here we go. Hello, Book Talk. It's me again. This is part 3 of a little series I'm doing on novels in verse. April being Poetry Month, I just really wanted to bring some of these fantastic novels to people's attention. I don't think that they get enough love on Book Talk, so let's change that. The next one is Kent State. This is a bit of a tricky read, but worth the effort. I picked this one because of its format, more so than anything else. It's really interesting. So this deals with the people who were shot and killed by the National Guard at Kent State during a protest for the Vietnam War. So we're far enough away from the Vietnam War to be able to maybe talk about stuff and try to unpack it. But the way that this novel does it is by giving voice to multiple perspectives. So I'm just going to show you a page. Here we go. So you can kind of see that the writing is all over the place, and that is meant to represent different perspectives. So maybe it's the press, maybe it's a neighbor who heard about it, maybe it's someone who was there, maybe it's someone whose family members were affected. And we just hear lots of different perspectives, and we realize that there are no easy answers, and there are a lot of what ifs. And that's how so many things in life are. That we argue about as a society. And I think that this book has a powerful way of showing that to us. So if you can really dive in and think about it, this I wouldn't say is a long read, but it's really unique, and I think you'd like it if you like a little history, and if you like the complex nature of difficult conversations and controversies. So give it a try. Hey TikTok, hey Book Talk. This is part 4 of a series on novels in verse that I'm doing to celebrate April, which is Poetry Month. And so the next one I've got here, I'm a little yak, is Punching the Air. And this is sad but powerful story, not based on a true story, but inspired by real events. It's by E.B. Zaboy and Yusuf Salam. And Yusuf Salam was one of the exonerated 5, so spent time in prison for something he did not do as a teenager. You should look into that if you are interested. I keep a little copy of an article on the true story in my book, which I'm a librarian, so I like to just have that little nugget in there. But this story talks about the power of art to heal and to get through a really difficult time. And so the main character, 16-year-old Amal, is imprisoned for something he didn't do, and uses art to get through that really difficult racially charged charge. I loved it because of its title too, which I just want to kind of briefly mention. So Punching the Air, and this is something that the author E.B. Zaboy has talked about. Punching the air comes from kind of the duality of that motion. So it can be something that's done out of frustration and anger, but it can also be done in victory and excitement. And there are both of those things in this novel. Highly recommend. Hello, everybody. If you've been tuning in to take a look at some novels in verse, this is video 5 for April, which is Poetry Month. I just wanted to celebrate some authors and some novels who are writing in a little different YA format that doesn't always get a lot of love on Book Talk. So video number 5, this is my last one. So if you haven't dropped me any comments about what you love in terms of novels in verse, I would love to hear them. I'm really into reading them right now because they're just fast, and I don't want to, I mean, they're fun, but like in a different way. They're just so unique. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you're reading. This last one is very different from the other ones that I chose for lots of reasons. Here it is. The Seventh Raven. This one is different first because it's fantasy. So the whole thing, you know, is about this quest. So if you're in the mood to read a book about a quest, but you only have an hour, this one's very short, both because it doesn't have a lot of pages and it doesn't have a lot of words because it's poetry. It's the story of a bunch of boys named Jack and their brother Robin. They're all brothers, and they get turned into ravens, sort of cursed. And then years go by, and then their sister April, when she learns about this curse, she is determined to break the curse, and that's the quest. So she's going off to figure out what happened and how do we undo it. And we hear from lots of voices along the way. We hear from the parents. We hear from all of the ravens. We hear from April and people she meets along the way. And what makes this the most unique is that it's not free verse, which is something that the rest of them that I looked at today were, they were all free verse, and this one wasn't, which is kind of cool. But it's not repetitive throughout the whole thing. It's that each character, their poetry is their own form of poetry. So there is some free verse in there, but then there's also lots of different metered poems, different rhyme schemes, and everyone has their own voice that way, and it's really neat. I loved this book so much. I am just gonna I'm gonna write to the author, David Elliott, and just beg him to turn it into a graphic novel, because I would love to see that as well. So that's The Seventh Raven. I highly recommend it. If you like more traditional poetry or you love a good quest story, could be the one for you. Happy Poetry Month. I hope that you read a few. It's kind of fun. Here we go.